I've gotten this question a scary amount of times, and honestly, I've been afraid of the answer because I know it's probably going to be pretty up there. But yeah, several times during live streams, people have certainly asked me how much have I spent on Apple products in their entirety, and it's kind of a difficult question because as a tech reviewer, there's a lot of products that I buy and return, a lot of products that I buy and sell. So for the sake of this video, I'm only going to be counting the products that I have bought and kept. I will count products that I have sold. I'm still gonna keep that on the list, which is probably a tad unfair because pretty much every year when I get a new iPhone, I sell my old iPhone or trade it in and use that to put a lot of money towards my next iPhone. But there are certainly a lot of products that I have bought and gotten a full refund on by sending back, so I'm not gonna count those because I know for sure I got all my money back on them. But it's not as simple as just going back and finding old receipts, because honestly, there were Apple products I bought as a kid, but because I was so young, I didn't even have a debit card yet and I couldn't drive, so my parents would buy the product and I would reimburse them in cash. So this is not hyper specific, but it's as close as I think we can possibly get. So without further ado, let's find out how much the Apple Sheep has spent on Apple. It goes all the way back to iPod Nano days, the first Apple product I ever purchased in my life. I saved up some lawn mowing money and reimbursed my parents with the cash. They bought the iPod for me, and even though I paid for it with my own money, I couldn't unbox it until Christmas morning, and I bought it at some time in November, but it was 200 bucks. That was pretty much my only Apple product for a while. It came with headphones and everything, but later on, I finally upgraded to an iPod Touch, 4th generation, 32 gigs of storage. At the time, 16 gigs was the bare minimum, so I thought it was so cool going 32 gigs. But it was a tad pricey. Had to spend $300 on that one. And during middle school, I actually dropped my iPod Touch and it broke. And while I was having it worked on getting fixed, I wanted an iPod to hold me over, so I had some spare cash at the time. I dropped 50 bucks on an iPod Shuffle, 4th generation. Still have it to this day. It worked fine. It's just obviously no screen. You gotta click around on it. So that was pretty much all I had spent on Apple products for a while until 8th grade when I wanted to start editing more videos, and I was using an iMac before this one, but it was my sister's old one. I didn't buy it or anything. I was just kind of using hand-me-down Macs until I finally was starting to get into Apple products, and I was playing around with the iMac configurator. It took me many months of saving and stashing cash away from birthdays and Christmas and that kind of thing. But my first Mac was the 21.5-inch iMac way back in 2012. I posted the unboxing of that iMac to the Tailosive TV channel recently. I'm not entirely sure what the specs on it were. I believe it was around a 2 terabyte hard drive, not even Fusion drive back then. And I don't know the official price, but I know that I was toying around with getting the 27-inch iMac, and I showed my dad how much it would cost, and I remember it being over $2,000, and he was like, no, that's way too much for an 8th grader. So we went ahead and settled for a higher spec 21.5-inch iMac. It ended up costing me about 1,800 bucks. My parents, I do believe, helped me out with part of it. I paid for, I think, more than half of it, but either way, I'll put the whole thing on there just for the record. I didn't buy many Apple products after that until my first iPhone, which wasn't until my freshman year of high school. I got the 64 gig iPhone 5. I looked up the original price on that model. It was actually $850. Seriously, like back then it was 16 gigs, 32 gigs, and 64 gigs. And if you wanted 64 gigs, man, you had to pay through the butt for it. I mean, it was my first phone, not just first iPhone, but first phone ever. I loved that thing, and I'm glad I got it when I did. The 12 mini kind of reminds me of my first phone, but yeah, 850 bucks for that thing, and I'll add sales tax to all this at the end. After the iPhone 5, I recall my parents caving in and allowing me to buy an iPad Air, 32 gigs, which was a little bit more than the base model, which was still 16 gigs at the time. This is not the iPad Air 3 or anything. This is the first generation iPad Air, the original, and I paid 600 bucks for that one, so it was a tad pricey. I was actually starting to do tech videos when I first got that iPad Air. I think that was one of the first Apple products I ever unboxed on camera, so I decided to spend a tad more on my next iPhone. I never got the 5S or the 5C, but I did get the maxed out 128 gigabyte iPhone 6 Plus. Biggest iPhone ever. It was the first iPhone with 1080p. The camera was amazing for the time. I loved that phone to death. I was so excited to get it, and the 128 gig model was $950. Don't sit on it though. Might bend on you. Mine never did, for the record, but I was very happy to get that phone. And yes, each of these phone purchases I traded in or sold my old iPhone to help offset the cost. Didn't get much after the iPhone 6 Plus until around 2015. Then I got the first generation iPad Pro, which used to only come in one size, 12.9 inches, and I got the 128 gig model. In fact, this whole YouTube channel I basically ran off of that iPad Pro for many, many months. I did lots of video editing, all my thumbnails on there, and that cost me $900. That was a pretty expensive iPad, and I even got a smart cover for that iPad, which was $80. And later on, I actually got the first generation Apple Pencil, which was $100 as well. And then sometime around that year, I also got the 42 millimeter Apple Watch. So this was back when they called it the Sport model. That one was around $430, and the first Apple TV that had tvOS. So this one had the A8 chip and the updated Siri remote, the one that Apple just killed off. I bought that certified refurbished, so I didn't have to pay full price for it. It was $120 though, and I thought that was cool because I never had my own TV in my bedroom. So now I had one, I could dock the Apple TV to it, and I thought it was awesome. I did buy Apple Watch Sport Band for about $50 that year as well. Then later into 2016, I bought the Apple Watch Series 2, 42 millimeter, $430 as well. And then I also got the iPhone 7 Plus, 256 gig. Back in these days, my Wi-Fi was crap. I couldn't do anything over the cloud storage, so I was getting as much local storage as possible, and that was $970. Very expensive phone at the time, but I loved the camera, and I loved the design, and no headphone jack, which drove a lot of attention to my channel because I didn't mind that it didn't have one. AirPods, of course, came out later that year, bought those $160, and because my channel was picking up traction and I wanted to edit more videos, I spent $2,000 on the base model 15-inch MacBook Pro. Only had 256 gigs of storage though, and yeah, nowadays if you want a 15 or 16-inch MacBook, it starts at $2,400. Back in 2016, when they first started doing the 15-inch variants, they actually started at $2,000, but of course the specs were not that great. But I was very, very happy to be all in on USB-C and Thunderbolt ports, so I dropped $2,000 on that one. That was by far the most expensive Mac until later. In 2017, I bought a 10.5-inch iPad Pro, 512 gigs of storage for $950. My wife still uses that iPad to this day, about 4 years later, and that was the first device I ever used with 120 hertz, which I still appreciate to this day. I got a smart cover for that one, which I believe was around $60, and didn't buy anything until the iPhone 8 Plus, which came out in September. Got the base model because at that point I had moved out of my parents' house. I had better Wi-Fi, so I could start using cloud storage. So $800 for that model. I did end up keeping it, and I also got the LTE version of the Apple Watch Series 3, 42 millimeters. That one I believe costed around $430, and I also got the Apple TV 4K with the A10X chip, except for some reason I opted for the 64 gigs of storage. I don't really know why, but that one costed me $200. And then a couple months later, I was crazy and I was kind of flexing, so I decided to opt for the stainless steel Series 3 so that it would match the iPhone 10 coming out, and that one cost me $650. And of course, then later in the year, I bought the iPhone 10, 256 gigs for $1,150. Very expensive phone, but by far the biggest upgrade year over year. And then the biggest Apple product on this entire list, even accounting to today, was at the very end of 2017, I bought the iMac Pro. The iMac I'm still using to edit videos to this day. That one, I was able to get an educational discount on it for $5,800. So without the educational discount, it would have been a little over $6,000. And to this day, I've not spent any kind of money close to that outside of like my house or taxes or that kind of thing. And then early in 2018, I bought 3 HomePods, which I have sold 2 of them now. That costed me over $1,000 at $1,050. And then in March also there was a red iPhone 8 that came out. I bought that and sold it later, but I'm still counting it on the list at $800. And then I didn't buy anything from that April until September. That's when I got the iPhone XS Max for $1,100 and the Apple Watch Series 4 stainless steel 44 millimeters for $750. Still best Apple Watch year over year upgrade of all time, so I love that thing. And then in October I bought the iPhone XR for $750. Held on to that for a while. My wife used it for a bit, but later on we ended up selling it. And for a time I wanted to have a different Mac in the gaming office from the tech room back at that old big studio I used to have, which was fun but very expensive. And that extra 5K iMac was another $3,000. So I ended up trading that iMac for a fairly heavily spec'd 13-inch MacBook Pro later on, but at the time there were more people in the studio. Some of us were streaming, some of us were editing. Once we downsized the office, didn't really need the extra Mac anymore. Then later in October of 2018, I got this iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch 64 gigs for $1,000. Still my favorite Apple product to this day. It is unmatched in that department. And I got a Smart Folio case for it, which was an additional $100. And I bought that 2018 Space Gray Mac Mini with the i7 6-core processor for $1,100. And of course, with this iPad, I also got the Apple Pencil 2, $130. And then in March of 2019, AirPods 2 came out. I still have those headphones, and I spent $200 on them. I also got the wireless charging case for $80 that I used for my older AirPods. My wife, I believe, still uses those now. And I didn't buy anything after March until September again for the iPhone 11 Pro Max, which was $1,100, and then AirPods Pro for $250, which I still use. I sold my iPhone 11 Pro Max to my dad, who's still using it, but still, it was an expensive iPhone nonetheless. And then in March of 2020, I got the Magic Keyboard case for my iPad Pro, which I did have a few gift cards that people had given me that I used towards it, but yeah, the retail price was $350. And then I didn't buy any more Apple products that I kept until the Apple Watch Series 6 in red, which I still have. This one was about $430. And of course, I got the iPhone 12 mini, except this time I opted for 128 gigs of storage because it wasn't too much more. That one was, I believe, $830. And then of course, MagSafe for $40, MagSafe Duo for $130. And that pretty much covers all the hardware that I've bought and kept. It does not count the hardware I ordered yesterday. I'm pretty much only planning on keeping the mini LED iPad Pro. The rest of the stuff I plan on returning. When it comes to software, I bought the Pro Apps bundle back when I was in school for $200, and that included Final Cut, Logic, Motion, and that's pretty much all the Pro software I use today. And the rest is kind of guessing for the most part. I mean, Apple Music is a bit confusing because I paid for the family plan for a while and had friends on that plan that would reimburse me, and then I opted for the individual plan for a while, and then I did the annual option. I rounded it out over the 5 years that I did pay for Apple Music to around $500. I think that's about right. And with iCloud, it's kind of the same thing. I had 2 terabytes for about a year and a half. Before that, I had like 50 gigs, and now I have 200 gigs. So it's kind of all over the place, and to try to calculate the average, I brought it to around $300 since I've started paying for iCloud storage. And then there's, of course, lots of Apple Watch bands I've bought over the years, so I just put in $100 for a couple extra Nike bands. iPhone cases, I've definitely bought a few silicone ones and leather ones. Because I change iPhones so much, I don't buy phone cases anymore because they just get dated so quickly for me. But in total, I estimated it was around $300 on phone cases, and a couple extra Apple Watch bands I threw in $100, which brings us to a grand total of $34,716, and that's pre-sales tax. I bought all these things with California sales tax, which brings the actual total to a little over $37,000 that I have spent on Apple products. But to be fair, you know, a lot of that stuff I did sell, so there's probably a good $4,000 to $6,000 worth of that product that I sold and then used that money back to buy more products. But still, it's an insane amount of money. I'm not trying to do this to flex or be proud of this. If anything, it's kind of a wake-up call of how much money I've wasted over the years, and it makes me want to be more careful with what types of things I spend my money on. But to also give you guys some interesting perspective, if I were to put every dollar put together I've ever spent on Apple products, from my first iPod Nano to the AirTag, all of that money would not cover the price of a standard range Tesla Model 3. Gives you a lot of perspective on how much those vehicles really cost, and all of this money put together would also not equate to a maxed out Mac Pro, which is still over 50 grand. So I would love to see these types of videos for other big YouTubers that have been doing Apple videos for much longer than I have. Can you imagine Marquez or John Morrison's total they've spent on Apple, or iJustine? Those videos would be fascinating. I don't think they're gonna watch this, but I would love for you guys to do those if you could. Probably gonna take forever, but hey, they're tax write-offs. You probably have some data on this already. So I hope I can be more responsible with my financial spending in the future. I hope you guys can too. Keep off those Hermès AirTag accessories. And if you wanted to see me calculate all these numbers with you guys, the audience, please feel free to check out a new channel I just launched. It basically takes all of my Twitch streams and exports them to YouTube. So if you can't watch the Twitch streams live and you want more of me talking and rambling like I always do, then that channel is going to have a lot of me rambling on Twitch, except now it's on YouTube, so it'll be in your subscription feed. Anyway, please feel free to check it out. Link in the description. And to those people that were trying to scrub ahead in the video to find out what the answer was and comment it at the bottom before everybody else could wait till the end, let's mess with those people really quick and just say, wow, oh my god, I spent $90,000 on Apple products. That's insane. I can't believe it's that high. I must have gone just completely out of control. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.